Ready to go?
I'm not loyal to him, but I'll be fine.
Okay, folks, we're going to call ourselves back to order, and the first item of business is to come out of closed session.
I move that this council certify by a recorded vote that, to the best of each council member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from the open meeting requirements of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act and identified in the motion convening the closed session were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed session.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Please cast your vote. Flags are blocking me, but yes, we're good. 5-0. Okay. We're officially out of closed session. So we'll now call our 4 o'clock session to order. I guess we've already called the roll once, so we don't need to do it again. Is there a motion to approve or to amend the agenda?
Move for approval of the agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, cast your vote, please. Okay. Motion passes. This meeting, as always, will be divided into 3 main sections. First is a work session to hear and discuss presentations that do not involve a council vote, followed by a closed session. We typically do that at about 5:30. Then the city council business meeting, which typically begins around 6:30. And I will apologize in advance to everybody for my laryngitis. So first item up is Charlottesville Albemarle Convention and Visitors Bureau update.
Good afternoon. I'm Courtney Kikation. I am the Executive Director of the Charlottesville Albemarle Convention and Visitors Bureau. Thank you so much for having me this afternoon. I really appreciate the opportunity to come and speak to you annually and update you as to what we've been doing. And I am looking for my presentation. I think I can just advance the slide. All right. Super. Thank you so much. If at any time you have any questions for me, please feel free to stop me. I don't have a script in front of me, and I'm happy to answer questions as they pop up.
Thank you.
Sure. So I represent the Visitors Bureau, which is formed through the operating agreement between the city and the county. So we represent both Charlottesville City and Albemarle County in promoting visitation to our localities, and we believe in building a welcoming environment for all visitors, and you'll see that overwhelmingly throughout my presentation. We call that Tourism for All. Our mission is to drive overnight visitation. Our Bureau is funded by a portion of the lodging tax, and only by a portion of the lodging tax. So that we get the first 30%. We get 30% of the first 5% of the lodging tax, and it comes back to the Visitor Bureau. So as we continue to build our product here and generate additional overnight visitation, our budget increases. When we're not successful in that, it decreases. And so we are highly dependent upon the success of the accommodations in the city and the county. We really strive to build a really better quality of life for our residents and our visitors when they come to see us, and to uphold the values of our organization, which are resiliency, unity, diversity, creativity, and responsibility. In October of 2020, I wrote a strategic action plan, and these are the imperatives on which that was built, to drive overnight visitation, as I said, increase visitor spending. So when we have visitors here, we want them to spend as much money as they can before they go back home. To develop our new visitor opportunities, so making sure that we're building connections among and throughout the industry and providing opportunities for people to enter the tourism industry, to tell stories that uplift and inspire, and to utilize our public funds with transparency and efficiency. I will not read this to you, but this is just a little bit more about our organization and what we call our elevator pitch, but essentially that we are funded through that lodging tax. Here are all of the sectors of the economy and the community that we support. Lodging, again, is bolded here because that's where 100% of our budget comes from, but we support restaurants, retail, attractions, agritourism, arts, recreation, the University of Virginia, local government, and our community. We will shortly have 11 full-time staff members and 15 board directors. This is who serves on our board. Councilor Wade represents City Council on our board at the moment. Chris Engel, the Economic Development Director for the city, also serves on our board. And the positions here that are bold are the ones that you all approve to sit on our board. So between the Board of Supervisors in the county and City Council, most of those positions are appointed through this body or through the Board of Supervisors. There are only 3 positions that are appointed outside of your realm of influence. Going back to Tourism for All, we work closely with our hospitality partners, community stakeholders, Destinations International, which is the international association that represents what we do, TripAdvisor, and Wheel the World to create a robust, inclusive culture for our tourism economy here locally. And this is another way of showing that very same chart. We have a lot of different partnerships in the community, that one of which you will have heard of previously. I made a presentation on Discover Black Seaville last year. We've won several awards for it in the past year. Oop, and it is going on without me. There we go. We've conducted accessibility assessments that I'll talk about in a minute. We have an extensive DEI comprehensive plan that's internal to our organization, and we work with many of the affinity groups at the University of Virginia. My clicker's not working properly. Thank you. So Tourism for All is trying to accomplish creating a welcoming environment for everybody who happens to enter our community as a visitor. So what we want the visitor experience to be is anyone can walk in here as a visitor to any restaurant, attraction, store, experience, hotel, and feel welcome here. And that is a lofty goal, but it is something that we feel really passionately about, and we're creating the blueprint for how this is going to be done around the world through our work with Tourism for All and Destinations International. That also means building tourism products that appeal to a diverse audience base, and really proposing a counter narrative to the one that has been in the national news since 2017. Who is the audience? We have a lot of different members to try and attract here, but the Black traveler has a lot of potential to come here, and historically has been a traveler that our product has not spoken to. And so we are doing that very intentionally through the work of Discover Black Seaville. We also included Hispanic and wheelchair users here as additional audience members, just to show you some of the different demographics and how much the spending potential is for each of those. And why should you care? Because there is there's a delay really in the travel industry in addressing equity and speaking to different audiences. And so we have the opportunity to be welcoming and at the forefront of this conversation. And when people see themselves in the advertising, the promotions of a destination, they know that they are welcome in that place and they seek it out. Our marketing and public relations efforts are centered around our brand pillars. So these are the 5 areas where we strive to promote. They're pretty broad pillars, but they represent some of the best of what we have here in the city and the county. Our current marketing campaign is Historic Vines, New Roots, and that is a campaign that nods to the fact that we have a rich cultural history here, but that we're telling it in a new way. And we're using wine as an entry point for that, but it's really about trying to create a sense of belonging for people so they want to visit and they want to come back when they do. Over the past fiscal year, we've had a lot of success. Thank you to City Council and to the Board of Supervisors for giving us some additional ARPA funding to be able to reach a national audience where we haven't been able to do that before, given our budget size. And we are sharing, I'm showing you here our success with travel and leisure and food and wine. Our creative has done well above the industry benchmark for travel destinations. And if you think about who is advertising in travel and leisure, it's not, you know, the city down just 30 miles away from here. It's Paris, it's Santorini, it's Bangkok. You know, these are major tourism hubs throughout the world, and we are competitive with them when we're putting out this advertising, which is really exciting. Wanted to point out here that the average time spent on articles that we wrote for these publications was 42 seconds. If you think about how long 42 seconds is anymore for somebody who's going like this through their phone, that is a long time. And so the benchmark is 31 seconds. That extra 12 seconds gives us that much more intention and that much better engagement. We are also able to leverage our local enthusiasts when we're putting out that advertising. We shared this one here because people were asking as visitors or as potential visitors, what is there to do here? And our local residents were saying, well, I love this and I love that. And it gives them a chance to feel pride about where they live and engage with our advertising and invite people here directly, which has been really fun. Our local pallet buy that we did over this year, we had an insert of Black-owned restaurants, and that received more than 2.5 times the page views of any other element of our campaign. This was really exciting for us to see that we had that much interest from travelers, again, nationwide. The local pallet is a national publication, in coming to our locally Black-owned restaurants. And then we've also done some other advertising. We did a purchase with WJLA up in DC and had them host their whole week here from Charlottesville and Albemarle County, which was an expansion of what we had done the previous year. And they went all over to different locations and welcomed the news from there. It was really well received. We have a number of different target markets. Charlotte and Baltimore are among them. I just wanted to show you the number here to show you that we were able to track our internet users over time to show a great increase when we're running advertising. We run our advertising most prominently in the winter, which are the months where we need the highest levels of visitation. Our hotels are mostly full in the spring and especially the fall, and so we don't run a lot of advertising during those times. We run some during the summer when it's a little bit softer, but most of where we focus is during the winter and during weekdays year-round. And then here's an increase in the number of users and sessions that for our target market of Washington, D.C. Our creative content update, we have just hired a social media manager. So we have now 3 people who work on marketing. So we have somebody who's dedicated to paid advertising, to earned media, which is public relations, and to our owned media. And the owned media are our social media outlets and our website. So our blog content has increased by over 46%. Again, and when we think about people's time focused on what they're able, when they're coming across content on the internet, an additional minute is a huge amount of time. We also have a brand new visitor's guide that we'll be sending out shortly, which is a collaboration and was all done in-house for the first time. Anything that we do in-house saves us a whole lot of money, which means that we're able to put more towards advertising and to building product and supporting our locally owned businesses. For our public relations, we had a 3-day weekend here from ESPN this fall, which was great. We'll be able to play that again when we host the cross-country championships in November of this upcoming fall. We have also seen a lot of success again in the DC and Northern Virginia area from PR. And here are some additional articles that we have gotten over the past year. Forbes magazine and Afar Magazine, our national publications. For visitor services and destination development, we have mobile visitor centers now. You may remember that we used to be in the upstairs of the transit center on the downtown mall, and we had another location in Crozet. During COVID, we closed those locations to reach visitors out in our mobile visitor centers. So that gives us the opportunity to go to where the visitors are when they're there, and also to reach different demographics. We can be at a winery one day and on the Rivanna River Trail another day. And that way we are able to cross-sell throughout the city and the county so that people know they can go to different locations than where they are. And we end up reaching a lot of those visitors through that visitor guide I was mentioning a moment ago. The welcome centers are throughout the state of Virginia. We also we do research when we talk to people at the Mobile Visitor Center. And most of the visitors who we talk to are staying at least one night, which means that we're reaching our target demographic. From 2021, we saw a decrease in outdoor recreation. Everybody was going outside. I know my kids got sick of hiking during 2021. So by 2022, they're like, please, no, let's do something else. But special events came back, and you can see that through visitor inquiries with an increase of 122%.
It's basically festivals.
Yes, but not just festivals. I mean, a special event can be, trivia night at a local bar, or it can be, prolific running on an early morning. So anything that is an event that is not just a daily occurrence ends up being a special event.
Okay.
So it doesn't have to be large. Our top points of interest, this is from our Zartico data. Again, that Zartico data was funded through ARPA, so thank you. Show that most of the people who come through Charlottesville go to Shenandoah National Park, not a surprise. And the second most visited area is Barracks Road, which is great for retail, and I'll talk a little bit more about retail at the end of the presentation. Also, thanks to ARPA funds, we were able to provide accessibility assessments to 62 tourism partners. And I have a video here in just a second I'd like to share with you. The other part of what I'll say here is that we conducted our first job fair with Monticello High School, and we happily do that with the city too, if the city schools would like to partner with us on this. We had 18 employers who showed up that day. We had space for 24, but a few of them had to drop out. They saw roughly 650 students over the course of the lunch hour that day, and they were immediately hired. We only advertised paid opportunities, and it was really exciting to see that connection with our industry and with young people in an industry that's been struggling a little bit to recover. So can you play the video, please? This video is in draft form, so it is not final, but it's very close.
I say just because I have this disability and I'm using a wheelchair doesn't mean that I can't live and thrive. My life is worth living and thriving for. I'm valued, I should be respected, I should be heard, and the travel industry needs to hear that. The only trip you will regret is the one you don't take. This is a trip that I will never forget. Charlottesville and Albemarle County, Virginia have left a special place in my heart. I've discovered so many people and experiences here that truly reinforce my love for travel. so much to do and see. From wine tastings at beautiful vineyards
It's good.
to immersive art and cultural experiences, all this is gorgeous. My soul feels refreshed. Don't let anything stop you from exploring. You are not limited to the walls within your home. You will never know what you're capable of until you try. And you will only regret the trips that you don't take. And let me tell you, this is the trip that you need to take.
That was great.
Thank you.
I love that.
It was really exciting. Candace Welch came here. She's Miss Wheelchair California 2023. And we were scouring the United States for the right person. And she just really was phenomenal. And we couldn't have asked for a better person to come here and experience it. And we learned so much from her coming here, and so did our partners. We were out at Blenheim Winery, and they didn't have any straws because from an environmental standpoint, you shouldn't have any straws. But she has limited capacity to use her hands, and so she can't hold a glass and sip wine. And so we had to go out and get her some straws so that she could enjoy the wine. And so it was such a great way for us to really make sure that our accessibility assessments were working, and that we had put the pieces together for her. So thank you.
Neat.
All right. So we also do destination sales. This is where we focus on our midweek business. So those are typically we invite groups here. Those can be reunions, student groups, business conferences. We don't have a lot of conference space. With the new UVA Hotel and Conference Center, we will have more space. And we're hopeful that we're going to be able to get more groups here and create citywides from having access to that space. But in the meantime, these are our hotel occupancy rates. As you can see, in 2013, things have slowed down a bit. And that is in response to the average daily rates being higher than they've been before. And so I imagine that we'll never see the rates of the hotels go back to where they were pre-pandemic, because everything costs more than it used to. But we're starting to see those rates normalize, where they've been much higher than they had been in the past couple of years. Revenue per available room is what the hotels make. So it's their occupancy and the rate combined. And so this is really the metric that we use to track the success for the hotels. This is only for hotels, so bed and breakfasts and homestays, Airbnb, VRBO, they don't report into this system, so we don't have the same access to data for them. For our sales efforts, as I said, we generate group leads. We have an employee who goes to trade shows to bring groups here that we think fit the price point and fit the needs and the space for our destination. She brings back requests for proposals and develops relationships with meeting and event planners to attract people here. She also hosts familiarization tours with those groups, so she'll take them around town and show them what they could do if they decided to bring their group here. So it is a very competitive process. And then we work with our hotel sales staff on an annual basis to make sure that we're doing what they need us to do and complementing their efforts rather than competing with them. And to give an idea of where we've been post-pandemic, these are the kinds of requests for proposals that end up coming in. So a lot of association and corporate and government business comes through here. For research, we have access again to Zartico, and some of the insights, it uses big data. And so sometimes the big data feels like it's on point, and sometimes we notice some anomalies in the data. And so I'm only sharing data with you that I feel pretty confident about. The visitors represent 24% of the retail spending here. which is a lot. Visitors are often the difference between a restaurant or a store making money that year and not. I'd like to give the wineries as an example. You don't have more than 40 wineries here because you have residents who are going to more than 40 wineries every weekend. I hope not. So we all probably need to get our health checked if that were the case. So it's the same with the restaurants and the stores that are here. The visitor dollar really does make a big difference to our economy. This is just a little bit of extra data about our retail mix here, and the red line represents where you want the visitor and resident ratio to be, which is residential being at 56% and visitor being at 44%. So we see a little bit extra visitation on the downtown mall and the shops at Stonefield, but right around where it should be. The Pantop Shopping Center is not surprisingly mostly residential.
When you say that that's where you want it to be, according to whom? I mean,
According to the
what's
industry standard.
Is that 56% an industry average or just a Charlottesville average? Or?
It's a national average. It's the comfort level for a community in having visitors not over visit. So over tourism is something that we talk about in our industry. We don't want any space that's not an attraction to feel like it's mostly visitors instead of a nice mix of visitors and residents.
Okay.
Yeah. Again, we're looking for overnight visitation, so long day trips, and short trips are great. They're great for getting additional funding and economic opportunity in for the city and the county, but as far as the CACVB focuses, we're really focused on overnight, and that's where we see the large portion of the spending. If you think about if you go on a day trip somewhere, how much money you spend as opposed to staying overnight. You know, when you're staying overnight, you have to eat dinner, you have to eat breakfast, you're probably going to fill your car up with gas. You're probably going to go shopping and do some other activities in the destination. And so in addition to wanting to generate the lodging tax, we also want people to stay overnight because the economic footprint is larger. And then this data also gives us access to not only who's coming here, but how much money are they spending. So we put a lot of advertising dollars into Raleigh-Durham. They come here. When they come here, they spend more than any other locality. So it's great to have this intelligence to go, all right, well, you know, New York comes here, but they spend the least amount of money. So maybe we won't focus our spend in New York. And New York is a very, very expensive market to advertise in, so we don't advertise in New York. And I'll just end it on, we have won some awards for Discover Black Seaville over the past year. The Adrian Award is an international award. The Destiny Award is a national award, and we are a finalist for the Monticello Wine Trail. It's really pretty incredible for an organization our size to have been up for 2 national awards in the same year, and we're hoping that Wheel the World and our video with Candace and our work with our accessibility assessments will earn us another one this summer. So, thank you for your time. Do you have any questions for me?
Thank you.
I just wanted, have a comment. I've been part of this community for 30 years. In the year and a half I've been on the board, I've learned a lot about, about attracting people here and getting them to stay here and things. And some of the things I found surprising, maybe several months ago at one of our meetings, we got information who's coming here. You mentioned some of them, and I jotted down some just from, I think number 1 was DC, and I think number 2, they kind of put Roanoke and Lynchburg together, which was kind of surprising to me that, they're number 2. And Richmond was number 3. I thought that they would be up there. Norfolk and New York, is that those kind of, I remember, as the top 5. I know Atlanta, Charlotte, and Durham there in the top 10 and things. So I just found it fascinating, and one reason that we don't have like big conventions here. We might have the hotel space, but I think, as I understand, we don't have that kind of that keynote space where all of the people can get together and hear us speak. We're kind of missing that here, and so that could be something that we could think about as a community. And few months ago also, we did some advertisement in newspapers, the leisure section of think Charlotte, Baltimore Sun, and other, to say, Charlottesville is a great place to visit. And was that successful? Do we believe that was successful? That
Yeah, print advertising is a little harder to track, but when we see visitors show up in destination from places like Baltimore and Charlotte, then we know that it's working and that the message is getting out. And that's why the website traffic is such an important metric for us, because if they're finding our website in those markets, chances are they found our advertising, and that's how they got there.
Yeah, I just want to add, and I'll let others chime in, is that I know this morning I did an interview with a consultant that we have trying to understand Black Seville and how that's working. That really were good consultants that you have for that, to see what comes of that. But I think that we as a council in Albemarle County have compiled a great board, because there's great insight from the different industries giving you advice and your staff advice on how to move forward. So anyway, thank you for your work, Courtney.
Thank you for
I was-
serving on our board.
I was curious about the visitors from Raleigh-Durham had the highest average visitors spending. What's
Yeah.
going on there?
It's big data, so you have to infer things, right? Like, we don't know for sure. What I notice about them, and also the Roanoke Lynchburg, is we have different stores here. So it's not surprising that people from New York aren't coming here to shop when they have everything at their fingertips, right? But we are only a 4-hour drive from Raleigh-Durham, and it's a different kind of place. And we also see them coming up for football games and things like that. So I think that's probably why, is we have a different store mix than they have down there. I feel confident that's why with Roanoke and Lynchburg. I used to live in Bristol, Tennessee. If I was coming from Richmond, this was the closest Trader Joe's. I would stock up my pantry from Trader Joe's and drive down to Bristol, which is a 4-hour drive from here. So I know that some of that is happening, but that's my guess.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? Thank you very much,
Thank you so
Courtney.
much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Next up, Todd, Human Rights Commission 2022 Annual Report.
Bear with me while I...
Is this your cheering section?
Yeah, I brought my cheering section, and moral support, as I do these things. And notes. I'm not as good with my memory as Courtney. I'm also going to bring up a little piece of paper here, just in case you guys have questions that I can't answer, and I need to go back and look them up. Let's see here. And I assume there's a button I hit that David's got control of back there. Aha, he's already on it. First of all, let me just say thanks for making time for us to do a report. I really appreciate that. I think it's one of the things that the commission had really looked forward to in previous years, and I know with all the changes in the city, that's sometimes hard to orchestrate. And so I was really excited to hear from Ashley and Kina that, there's going to be a date coming up for you to present an annual report, and we're going to get you on the calendar well in advance. So really appreciate that. I think it's a great step forward because it gives us a chance to tell you about what we do. And I think also just thanks to Kina and David for helping me work out the logistics of making the presentation. And I got to name my team here because honestly, both the work that I'm going to talk about tonight, but also just the preparation of the report itself, these folks here made it really, truly possible. So just to name everybody, Victoria McCullough is our Community Outreach and Administrative Specialist. Saad Khalifa, the newest addition to the team, is our Intake and Administrative Specialist. And then Jenny Helmandaller and Lily Gates have been interns with us since June of 2021. And I can tell you that when they sent me an email back in 21 and said, hey, we'd like to help, and I was the only one in the office, I said, I'll take you up on that offer. And so they've been with us ever since, working on a very part-time basis, but doing really important work for the office and the commission. So just shout out to them. What I want to do is obviously there's a detailed report attached to your agenda packet, and so I'm not going to go into all those details today, but what I will like to do is just hit a few highlights, and so let's see if I do the big button. I think that, remember in David's email, I got it. Okay, so in this presentation, I just want to hit kind of three main things here. And so I want to give you some background, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the roles of the office and commission. I know when we did 221s ahead of our ordinance revisions last year, or maybe it was earlier this year, we talked about the role of the office, and I think it's always good just to review how the role of the office and commission differ. Also going to talk about some key takeaways from last year. Specifically want to give you some highlights of the work, but also talk about a few of the observed trends that we saw. And then also kind of capping that off with what conclusions did we draw from the work in 2022 and what are we working on now? Okay, so this little chart just to kind of give you a sense of how things are structured. So the Charlottesville Human Rights Ordinance, which was passed in 2013, established a Human Rights Commission and an Office of Human Rights. We work in concert, and I think that's the important thing to know. I have to go back and forth between glasses and not glasses here. We've amended the Human Rights Ordinance twice since it was passed in 2013, once in 2021 and then again in 2022. So that was the 221s we had fall of last year. And since then, basically what I want to make sure that you understand is that that the commission is an appointed body by city council. Whoops, I'm hitting the wrong button. There, gotta go the other way. And their focus is on addressing systemic issues and then providing advice back to you. Whereas our office handles the individual work that comes through the public, and then we support administratively the HRC. So just to give that quick overview so you remember how it's structured. So the Human Rights Ordinance is the document that basically is our instruction manual for how to do what we do in both the commission and the office. And the detail in the Human Rights Ordinance is extensive. It's gotten much bigger since we passed the amendments back in 2022. What I want to give you here is sort of a plain language summary of Section 2-433, which is really where it defines the roles of the HRC and OHR. So first, and again, this is translated into plain language from the original language in the ordinance, but we assist individuals with complaints of discrimination. We provide awareness, education, and guidance, also could be read as outreach to the community. We also do reviews of city policies. That's mainly a commission task. We're working now to seek federal work share agreements with the EEOC and HUD. Make legislative recommendations to City Council for your annual legislative agenda. And then finally, prepare recommendations for City Council related to the actual function of the commission. So those are paraphrased again, but I wanted to keep it in plain language for the purpose of the presentation.
So, quick question, sir.
Yeah.
The first
Let's go back.
bullet, number A,
Yeah.
sits into, I just want to make sure I understand exactly what that means. Like if a person has an individual with a private company, do you help them go through that company's grievance process? Or
That's a great question.
or what exactly does that mean?
So obviously, each time somebody comes to our office, they bring something unique to the table, right?
Yeah.
No two are the same. We have, within the ordinance, we have a very clear process for handling employment discrimination, housing discrimination, public accommodation discrimination, credit, and private education. So by the time somebody comes to our office, what we're going to do is hear what they're saying, look at our ordinance and make sure it's one, jurisdictional, so geographically did it occur in the city of Charlottesville. Number two, does it meet the time frames for filing a complaint? And then ultimately, are they presenting a case of discrimination that is covered by the ordinance based on the identified protected class that they say they are a member of, and then what actually happened, what harm happened, and what evidence do they present to support that something took place? So in going over that, so to answer your question specifically, if somebody had a grievance within a company or something like that, we do ask them, what did you pursue internally to resolve that grievance? So it is important. It's something to say if it was an employer, for example, right? It's something that the EEOC or the Attorney General's Office of Civil Rights would also ask them. Did you pursue to the fullest extent possible the internal processes that were available to you? And sometimes we'll say, just depending on the situation, we'll say, looks like this is something that you might want to pursue internally. You're welcome to file a complaint, but if they haven't explored any of the options internally first, we do suggest that they do that. If that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Yep.
In many cases, it may be required that they
Indeed.
go and do the internal process.
I think that's a good point. Yeah, that was my point with saying that the EEOC or Attorney General's office would suggest the same because they want to make sure that they've pursued those. Yep. Thanks. Great question. Any other questions about any of these items? All right. Okay. So there's a lot of words in the report that are kind of terms of art for our work, right? In the report, you'll find in the appendices there's a data dictionary. It has lots of definitions for the terms that you'll find in there that you might not know what they mean just in casual conversation. And props to Lily because she worked a lot on updating those definitions. We think about it a lot because how we talk about the work is very important to understanding what we're doing. There's 3 words that I want to talk about in here that'll help you understand the data that I'm going to present. So first of all, what is a complaint? So a complaint is an incoming contact in which an individual who wishes to pursue action regarding an allegation of discrimination that falls within the jurisdiction of the Office of Human Rights as defined by I put CRHO, Charlottesville Human Rights Ordinance. I think Human Rights, HRO, typo. How do you caught that one? So in any case, that's the thing that our office is really tasked with addressing is complaints. But we get a lot of the next thing, inquiries. So an incoming contact involving services provided to an individual by the OHR that are unrelated to a complaint and/or an individual allegation of discrimination that falls outside of our jurisdiction as defined by the ordinance, okay? So we get a lot of contacts, people asking questions, people trying to navigate a system, people thinking something's discrimination but it might not be. So we receive a lot of those things as well, and that takes quite a bit of time to help people get to the right resource, right? So we do a lot of that bit of it, which brings me to the next definition here, which is navigation. So this is not something different from a complaint or an inquiry. It's actually, navigation is a classification of an inquiry. So this is what we end up doing when somebody comes in with something that's other than a complaint. So it's an incoming or outgoing individual service contact, originating usually as an inquiry, always as an inquiry, but oftentimes with many follow-ups afterward, that may include referrals to other service providers or assistance to access services or communication with other agencies, or sometimes just clerical support, helping people write something to present to another agency. So I just want to make sure that those things are clear because we use those terms throughout the data discussion. Okay, so going back to that 2-433 of the ordinance and the piece about assisting individuals with complaints of discrimination. So the commission has a really specific role in complaints of discriminations, the individual complaints. They do appeal hearings. So for a complaint that was dismissed, they can appeal it to the HRC, and they also review findings once a case has been investigated. To date, they've only held one appeal hearing, I think, in the history of the commission, and they've never held a public hearing on a final determination on a case. So there were none as well in 2022. From the office's perspective, this is just a few numbers that we'll look a little bit more in depth on in a few slides coming up, but we had 3,253 incoming contacts. So we're talking about complaints, inquiries, requests for information, things like that. Those all came into the office. 67 of those inquiries and complaints were originating in Charlottesville. So that's 54% of the total of inquiries and complaints specifically. Housing was by far the most often identified protected activity in our inquiries and complaints received by the office. Also to note, 58% of all the contacts we classified as navigational. So that means they were not a complaint of discrimination, but something else, guiding somebody to another service, okay? And then specifically covered by the ordinance, because navigation is not covered by the ordinance, but complaints are, we opened 9 new complaints in 2022, okay? I think by the end, I think we had, I can't remember what the total was, somewhere around 12, 13 things that were ongoing, because we had cases that were open the previous year and still going, but 9 new ones just in that year. Okay, so grabbing those 3 numbers from the top of that OHR list, here's some more details about what those things entailed. So, I have some numbers wrong there. So 10 new complaints. I thought that was wrong. So 10 new complaints rather than 9. Look at that. The numbers are right on the same slide even. 113 new inquiries, 1,931 client follow-ups, 181 general contacts, 1,018 third-party incoming. That's somebody contacting us about somebody else or something, some sort of interaction we're having with a third-party service provider, all to make up those 3,253. Another thing that's important here, here's the numbers of incoming contacts over the years. I think maybe important to note is that from 2021 to 2022, that was a 60% increase in incoming contacts. So that's quite a bit.
To what do you attribute that?
That's a great question. I don't honestly know. I can't say.
Is there a difference in the quality or the character of the inquiries?
I think, well, that's a good question. I think that what we saw was certain people coming in repeatedly. So I think sometimes when you have a really complex issue, you see the same person a lot of times. And I think some of those are related to that. Or we're doing a lot of outgoing outreach to try to find resources sometimes for people. So that could be part of it too. I think what I will say is in this year, we're going to be tracking a little bit more that navigation piece in greater detail to say, what are we navigating to specifically when we do that? So I think a lot of what you're seeing there is navigational stuff.
I'd also be curious to know how many unique individuals you end up working with in a particular
That's a good
year.
point. I've been thinking about how we can suss out the data. I think we can make our data collection do that, but I'm going to put a note in there for 2023 to do an individual count as well.
I mean, the reason I ask, my law firm ends up getting, because we advertise that we give free initial consultations.
Yeah.
People call us with all kinds of things that we can't do anything about.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's the ones we can't help who keep calling and calling and calling.
I would say that's probably true for us as well. And sometimes we're able to do small things for people, and then they come back because they
Yeah.
can you
Anyway,
do the next thing. So it's a good point. I think hopefully with our data collection this year, we'll be able to give you even more detail on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that suggestion. I'm going to make sure we do that for 2023. So continuing on in that other bullet that was under the OHR takeaways, housing again is the thing that people ask about most often. So maybe to answer your question, I think that is the thing that we hear about most often, where it's people asking for, I can't find housing, I can't find affordable housing, I'm having difficulty negotiating with a landlord, I'm having difficulty attaching a voucher. All these kind of housing-related issues, and the reason people come to us, potentially because we're very accessible, so we're an office that people can walk right up to and get the supports that they need and ask questions, and we can help them connect to the resources. But I think it's super important to note that 281 contacts, inquiries and complaints, over the past 5 years have been related to housing. It far outstrips all the other protected activities. So just a point to note. Next, here's the other piece, and this is where we get back into that navigation piece, that why are we seeing so many people? So 58% of all of our contacts, so 2,503 in 2022, were navigation related. So guiding people to other resources, trying to help them sort out systems. So again, we're going to collect more data on that in 2023 and be able to be more specific about what are all the little things, particularly so we can highlight some trends. So moving on to that outreach piece. So section 2-433B, providing awareness, education, and guidance. So we, in 2022, and I got to advance my notes here to keep up, the HRC kind of took on some new things that they hadn't done before in terms of community outreach. While they attended one community event, I believe that was one in conjunction with something that Victoria had organized, they also did a public discussion and 2 public polls. And to talk a little bit more about that piece, the commission organized a public poll to identify topics of concern in the community. And in doing so, they then set up a public discussion, and I believe that was back in March that they had a town hall that was focused on emergency housing and the availability of quality, affordable housing. So they used the results from their poll to decide on a topic and then held a discussion about it. In September, they did another public poll to identify issues of legislative concern by the public in their development of their legislative recommendations to council. So this is new for them. They hadn't really done this before, and I think it's a good tool that they're going to try to use more in the future. From the office's perspective, and this is largely in part thanks to Victoria's organizing efforts, we did 160 different community outreach activities and partnered with 57 different collaborators to do outreach events around our services that we provide, develop networks for referral. So going back to that navigation piece, it's hard to do navigation when you don't know who's out there doing the thing that people are asking for. So Victoria's been instrumental in developing those. And then just providing general guidance to in partnership with other service providers on projects that support the community. So that's our piece for outreach. The next piece is talking about that review of city policy, which is a thing that mostly the commission holds. And so in this case, you may recall getting a couple of council recommendations. We had 2 resolutions within the HRC, and then 2 public discussions centered around some of this work as well. So first of all, the recommendations you got were around a language access plan for the city of Charlottesville, which I believe Deputy City Manager Marshall has also been working on. Thank you. We appreciate that. Just to provide greater accessibility from a language perspective to community members here in the city. And the other recommendation they made were around COVID-19 precautions at ACRJ. I think they had heard from a community member that they were concerned about maybe family members or people that they knew that were incarcerated and had some concerns about that. So the commission provided some recommendations and eventually led to a discussion, which is one of those 2 public discussions with Colonel Coomer and I believe Sina McGill, who was on council at the time, about those recommendations. So that was a productive conversation for them. The 2 internal resolutions were, one, to promote a language access plan, but also the second one was to develop a community engagement plan for the commission itself, which is talking a little bit about what tools are in our toolbox to engage the public and learn from the public about what they want the commission to be focused on. The other additional discussion that they had publicly was around the conditions and availability of public and subsidized housing, again, originating from that poll that they did with the public to learn about what is the concern in the public that they would like the commission to address. In all these things, our role in that as an office is just to provide support to the commission, to help them get that poll out to the public, to help them get organized to receive the public when they want to do these things, and just to help them codify the resolutions and so forth. So our role is smaller than the commission's under this section of the ordinance. Next piece, this is a newer one that got passed when we passed amendments to the ordinance back in 2021. Got to get my years straight here, because that was our first time we amended the ordinance. And this was to enter these federal work shares with the EEOC and HUD. So that was when we first amended that. Ordinance was back in 2021. We did it again, amended ordinance to have substantial equivalence to federal fair housing law, so we can enter into this work share agreement with HUD's Fair Housing Office. So we're still working on that. I'll talk a little bit about more of that later. But again, our purpose in that, in terms of the office's role, is to provide the administrative support for the commission to review these things and then ultimately lift them up to you all for consideration. And I'll talk a little bit more about where we have landed in the process of moving toward that federal work share in a little bit. Second to last, 2-433E, making legislative recommendations to council. You may recall receiving a letter from the commission outlining their recommendations. Again, partly guided by what they heard from the public, but also what they valued as a commission. So they talked about recommendations with regard to housing equity, transportation equity and access, health and food equity, as well as equity in law enforcement. And again, our job is just to provide data and information to the commission and then help them craft whatever they would like to make in terms of recommendations to you all. The last piece in the ordinance that guides what the roles and duties are, 2-433F, providing recommendations to you all around their own function, around their own function of the commission. So you probably have seen their rules and procedures at some point, but they have their own internal rules and procedures that guide how they conduct their meetings and their business. They redefine the quorum, especially after, I think, in 2021, the commission was limited to 9 members, so they wanted to make sure that their bylaws or their rules and procedures met that, so that they could redefine the quorum and still get their work done. So that's where that is. And then, of course, they also adopted recommendations to the human rights ordinance, not only for the substantial equivalence for fair housing, but to improve some of the organization and procedural stuff that they handle, and how that was represented in the ordinance. And it looks like I did CRHO again. I think I write CRHA far too much. Charlottesville Human Rights Ordinance. There you go. We'll get there. And again, our role in this is to do the typing. We do the clerical and administrative support to make sure that these things can happen. All right. So moving on to this, let's talk a little bit about conclusions and updates that we drew in terms of the commission's work in 2022. So first of all, I think what I've noticed, and I've been here a little over 5 years, I've seen that the commission, whenever they spread themselves a bit too thin, and this is probably true for any of us, they struggle to achieve the goals they set. They're often very ambitious about what they want to do, but what we found is that if they can narrow their focus, they're much more successful at actually getting something tangible done. And so the commission has realized that as well, and in their strategic planning meeting this past March, they really narrowed their focus into housing issues. And so that's really what they're going to focus on. So you can expect in the fall to probably hear what their recommendations are around housing issues. I think the other thing that was a takeaway from 2022 is that they do have a toolbox for engaging the public, and they tested that out with some town halls and public polls. I think they're going to continue to do that this year, but they're also thinking about ways to engage with groups on a regular basis. For example, now that their focus is housing this year, they're going to send liaisons from the commission to various housing-focused groups that, to inform their work. So they're going to be sitting in on meetings of CLIC and Livable Seville, probably the HAC, different things like that. And I'm hitting all the wrong buttons. Here we go. Okay, back there. So they are trying to gather more information, because I think one of the things that makes their work stronger is when they feel informed about what the piece around which they're concerned. So they're doing that this year. And finally, what we've also noticed is when we had for a while a lot of volatility in the commission, a lot of change, a lot of changing faces. And this past year, we only added one commissioner as we moved into 2023, and we didn't lose anybody. And in fact, the chair and vice chair were reelected. And what I'm seeing is that when we have some stability in the organization, they actually can coalesce as a group and get more work done. So I'm excited to see what they come up with by the end of this year. All right, I'm going to hit you with some takeaways from the commission's or the office's work, and then we'll wrap it up, and you can ask any additional questions that you have. So again, we noticed a 60% increase in intakes from 2021 to 2022. And so for us, again, in 2021, it was me, and then halfway through the year, Ginny and Lily joined, which was a tremendous help. And when Victoria joined in the beginning of 2022, it was a tremendous help to field all these incoming contacts, because these are people walking in, people knocking on the door, people sending us emails, people making phone calls, leaving messages. So in order to be a responsive office, we need the staff that can do that. And so in 2023, we were excited to be able to hire Sod. Thanks to your support, I think you provided ARPA dollars for that hire. Thank you so much for that. And it's, again, improved our ability to be responsive. What I really dislike, and it still happens sometimes, but is when we get a call and we can't get back to somebody in time, and then they call us again because we haven't gotten to be able to respond to them quickly. And so trying to keep ahead of that and trying to make sure we're responsive to the public is very important. The other thing I think to note is there's the number, 15 open complaint cases. So I think I had a 9 and a 10 in there, but 10 was the number of new complaints that we had, but that means we had 5 other complaint cases that had carried over from previous years. So one of the things that I think is important is to make sure that we have the ability to address those concerns. And that's one, through mediation. Mediation is probably one of our most powerful tools for getting resolution for people who file a complaint. But investigation is secondary. So if mediation fails, investigation is our other option. And so as we move toward these federal work shares, so the Fair Housing Assistance Program in particular, there's a likelihood that we will have a higher workload. We actually have I think Lily sent out a FOIA request to HUD just to see over the past maybe 5 years, what is the level of housing discrimination cases that are coming to HUD at the federal and or state level to see what can we anticipate as coming to us once we enter that work share. But in any case, given that we had 15 open complaint cases at the end of 2022, having somebody that can constantly stay on top of that, again, in the same like customer service spirit, being able to be responsive and follow through with those as quickly as we can. And there's nothing worse than knowing that we have cases languishing just because we're dealing with new incoming things and not getting to those investigations. Last, again, 58% of all of our incoming and outgoing contacts were navigational in nature. And most of those were related to housing concerns. So I think what I want to take away from that is that there seems to be some unmet need in terms of helping people connect to housing resources. And I think the other piece that we note, and this is anecdotal, but it's something that we've observed and continue to observe, is that there's an unmet need for mental health care in the city, because a lot of people are bringing issues that they are unable to address with our current local resources, in addition to their housing concerns. So we're going to know more about that. I say it's anecdotal right now because this is just based on what I experienced working with people. In 2023, we're going to define those navigation and advocacy. We added the advocacy piece because we do find that a lot of time we're serving as a liaison or an advocate for an individual who comes to our office. But we're going to be able to further define the exact services we're providing at each of those contacts, and we'll have those numbers for you at the end of this year. So I think that's all I had for you. Yep. There's the contact if any member of the public would like more information. We're going to be, one note is I'm going to post this same report that you got in the agenda packet. We'll put it on the city website on our webpage. I'm going to make a few adjustments to the definitions of inquiry and navigation because I think I noticed some things. As you see in my own presentation, I find some typos. So always editing, always a work in progress. But if you have any further questions, happy to answer those now.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Questions, anybody?
I just thank you for all of the hard work that you all do. It's very important, and I'm grateful. One question I have is, would it make sense to have, when you do this report a year from now, to also include the HRC as well? I mean, you're doing a lot of reporting for them, and it sounds like, it looks like you're carrying some of their water, which I'm sure you're happy to do, but I just wonder, maybe that's something we on council could think about as well. It seems to me that would be a good combination, so.
Thanks for that. Yeah, and we thought about that. I actually talked about that a bit in the commission, like to decide like who should come today, right? And I think one of the things I think about too is, just you all have, what do you have, 40 boards and commissions right now, and all these folks are very capable individuals with full-time jobs and families and all those things. And so our job is to provide administrative support to them. And so I said, how about this? Be available. I think our chair may actually be watching the Zoom presentation right now, but I said, if they have questions for you, listen so you can answer those and respond afterward. But we did take on the role of doing the presentation. But if you feel like it would be helpful to have the chair here for the future, we could do something like that and talk about what that might look like.
Yeah, I think so, but I'll chat with my colleagues and see what makes the most sense. Yeah.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, I have a comment. In my day job, I work with a lot of individuals looking for work. They're leaving, and over the course of the last 10, 12 years, I have a sense of some good places to work and bad just by talking to helping individuals with their resumes or job searching. So do you see a pattern of places that you see people come in, and maybe it might be worth an unofficial conversation with that place and say, listen, we getting a lot of complaints. It's not that you're trying to scare them or whatever, but it may be something that they're not aware of, that they can get straight, because the word will get out there that it's not a good place to work, or they have issues, and maybe sometimes just knowledge is powerful, and maybe they can make some changes without a lawsuit or whatever.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, and I want to be careful that I'm not going to toss anybody's name out there. I would say that, we don't necessarily get a lot of reports of employment discrimination from the same employer.
Okay.
But one of the tools in our toolbox in the ordinance is informal dialogue. And so it sort of depends on what the individual presents and what they're comfortable with actually doing with their complaint, right? Sometimes we do have really successful conversations, and I can say this is also true, has also been true for housing situations where what they really just want is somebody to kind of help them talk to their employer or help them talk to their landlord about an issue so that it gets straightened out. And I think that can be very powerful just in terms of it's not just the two of them in the room. There's a third person there saying, like, what can we do to resolve this?
Yeah.
And again, the formal aspect of that would be mediation. And again, I think that's a super powerful tool. We work with a company called Resolute Mediation and Arbitration Incorporated. And I would say that is one of the most unique things that the office offers, is that ability to mediate a complaint and potentially reach a settlement outside of court. So, I think there's opportunities for those dialogues to happen on a like mass scale, like this is the worst offender kind of thing. I haven't necessarily seen that, but when we do get repeated things, and I would say that more falls in the housing arena, we do have those opportunities for dialogue.
So that's helpful. That's helpful, and I appreciate this information. I'm just trying to get a sense from you of how do you as someone who is working, is grinding, is doing this every day. What do you feel like? Is there anything that you need, that you feel like, if I could do A, B, or C, or you feel like that it's heading in the right direction? What can we do as council?
What can council do for our office or the commission?
Yes.
Thanks for that's really kind of you to ask. I think.
No, I'm not saying we're going to
Yeah.
actually do it. Yeah, I saw Mr. Rogers. I felt the eyes,
We'll talk about it.
Well, I actually have a list right here. No, I don't have a list. I think by being interested in the work, number one, that's amazing, right? The fact that you all scheduled time for us to be able to present a report. I know that several years ago we were clawing to try to get in front of council, and I think it was just there was pandemic, there was everything going on, there was lots of transition. So this is a great step in the right direction. I think also if there are things that you want the commission to do or to look into, like there's an issue, for example, because one of their charges is to provide you recommendations, right? That is basically their biggest charge, to give you some recommendations, and they have the ability to look into things maybe more in depth than you all have time to do. So if there's a human rights related issue, let us know, because we can task the commission with that, because ultimately they get their direction from you all and the ordinance.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. A couple questions. One, I know this wouldn't really be the 2022 report, but I know you've recently taken on the FHAP agreement.
Yeah.
And everything that comes with that.
Yes.
What has been your experience in terms of how that's going so far? Is it still too early in terms of to be able to provide any feedback to us in terms of how everything's going?
I'm glad you asked that. I think that was one of those points where I got out of sync with my notes and the slides, because I wanted to drop a few updates on that. So you all passed the ordinance right back in November of 2022 with the amendments for substantial equivalence to federal fair housing law. We then took that and I sent it to our contact at the HUD Fair Housing Office. And then we had a subsequent meeting with their interim director. So that's Eric Steinecker. I think maybe some of you have seen him. He attended one of our commission meetings as well to discuss this when we were in the early stages. So we went through it with a fine-tooth comb again. And we had done this previously, but I think that as they review things and think about them more, kind of looking at them more closely, they're saying, I think you should change this, this, and this. So we got maybe a list of, I would say, like 5 major things that they want us to change. When I say major, it's not the 15-page amendment that the last one was. It's like wording changes, some specificity in there that they want to see. So we're going to work on those things. I figured we'd get through this annual report bit, and then we're going to go look in depth at that and then present that to you probably in the fall. I think that's where we need to go with it.
Yeah.
But
And where are you
yeah.
at in terms of your capacity to begin to conduct an investigation if one came in?
Yeah, got you on that. And I think that, so part of what you all approved funding for with the ARPA dollars, again, that's been super helpful, because this is the biggest the office has ever been. I think for the longest time it was just 2 people. And so now we've got 3 full-time staff and 2 interns still with us. So right now we're we're able to do investigations, but we're not super efficient at it just because we're still kind of sorting ourselves out with the recent hire of Saad. We have money now to hire an investigator as well. So I think that is our next big move, is to get that process rolling so that we can really have somebody specialized and kind of focused in their own space on investigations specifically. I think that with that, we'd be prepared to get rolling. But again, kind of without that information from HUD that we sent the FOIA request for, about what is the anticipated, or what were the, over the last 5 years or so, what were the cases that would have come here had we had the FAP work share in place, then I think we'll really have a good sense. But in my experience, if you have like 5 investigations, full-fledged investigations rolling, and you have a person, that's about as many as any one person should handle, like at any given point, because it becomes too much to juggle. So, and that's also what I've heard from EEOC investigators, is that if you do more than that, you start to get off track. So, and as you saw, we have a pretty high workload right now. So we really need to get that person who's just focused on that and keeping it moving. And again, some of those are in mediation, and that's why mediation is so valuable, because it keeps the thing rolling. But again, I think that we could do better, and that's what we're hoping to do with that hire.
Yeah, well, I think it definitely makes sense that you would need a new staff position just to do that.
Yep.
And I know you kind of have already just swallowed the elephant in terms of housing discrimination investigations. One of the things we also hear from the community is, the long history of, could the Office of Human Rights have the authority to do investigations on its own of employment discrimination as well?
Yeah.
I'm sure in part your evaluation of what it will take to do that, if there's the capacity to do it, will come from evaluating how the investigations of housing discrimination goes. Are you thinking there's like a timeline, like a year and a half from now, to kind of like look back and assess, like, is that something that is worth taking on, or that we have the ability to take on, or we could take it on if we had this given to us from council?
Thanks for that question. So to clarify, we do have the capacity, or we all have the authority, I should say, under the ordinance to do investigations in all of the protected activities. So that's employment, housing, public accommodation, credit, and private education. What I think you're maybe asking about specifically is, will we enter into a federal work share with the EEOC
Yes,
to have
sorry.
the Fair Employment Practices Agency certification? And I think I think that is, you hit it in the sense that I want to get into the Fair Housing Assistance Program, the work share with HUD for housing cases first, see how that manifests and what that impact is on our workload and our staffing. And then once we feel like we kind of have that under control, then pursue the Fair Employment Practices Agency status. I think that's valuable. Obviously, it's part of the ordinance, right? So we need to be in that process, but I think there is a time frame, and I think it's after we get through interim certification with HUD on the Fair Housing Assistance Program, and then sort of get that solidified as to full certification, and see what the workload looks like and our ability to contend with that. But yeah, I think they're both possible. It's just there's a bit of unknown there, and I want to see how it pans out a bit.
And last question is, I know one of the other things that's been talked about in the community is the desire or possibility of the Human Rights Commission doing that kind of on a yearly basis, deep dive on a specific issue, delivering reports in terms of policy changes the city could make. I know you talked about that tonight in your report. What would it take from council in order to see that happen in a way that more clearly results in city council making actual policy changes, in your opinion? Is it council kind of just as a body giving a clear directive, like, we want to study on this issue with policy recommendations? Would there be additional funding or something that would need to be attached to that in order to make it happen? Or
I really appreciate that question. Yeah, I think that is a really good, it's something that the commission has wrestled with, I think, since I've been here, is how do we, one, decide what to look into, and number two, how do we go about actually doing the investigation? And by which I mean, I should use a different term. How about we'll say the research necessary to create a work product for you? I think a couple of things could be helpful from council, and kind of goes back to the comment to Councilor White, is that whenever council has an issue that they would like the commission to look into, let us know. Let me know, or you're welcome always to come to a commission meeting and let them know. But I think that would be helpful, because then they know that it's important to you, and I think that would kind of light a fire under them and make sure that they're kind of interested in doing that work as well. What it would take, I think, notice that like they are getting to the point where they're more laser focused on what they want to do. So they're narrowing in on housing mostly because I provide them data that says this is what people are asking about, and they're also interested in it, and they know people who've had personal experience, so they're invested in that. Part of what they need to figure out is what aspect of housing, because that's pretty big.
Right.
And then number two, like what do they need to know in order to get that done, and or what resources do they need to get the information that they need to create a work product. So I think that, you know, one of the things that with Jenny and Lily being here, and we've now expanded our full-time staff, I'm talking with them about how can we engage our interns while they're still here for as long as we can with the commission. Is there something that they need researched? Is there something that that they need written or provided to them that we can facilitate their process as they go forward? But I think also just saying, anytime council can say, we would like something specific about X topic by such and such date, that just gives them more parameters to work under. So that would be helpful.
Thank you. And again, as others said, just thank you for all the work that you do. I know that you and your office work incredibly hard, and you know, you look at the information you present us here in office, it's basically doing social services work, community organizing work, investigations, and I talk to people all the time who have experiences where the work that you've done and your team has done that has made a huge difference in their life. And I don't think I've ever heard anybody say anything bad about an experience with you, which is very rare for local government. But you really all do work incredibly hard, and I really appreciate it.
Thanks, I really appreciate
and I think,
that. It means a lot.
If we as council could invest even more and even more staff capacity, I think I just see all kind of even greater opportunities. So thank you.
Thank you. And if you do at some point want to engage with commission, just let me know. We're always happy to make time for a counselor. I know that Councilor McGill would come periodically to council meetings just to talk and get updates, so happy to schedule that. Thank you.
I just had one thought, conscious of the fact that we're about 15 minutes behind.
Yeah.
So, but on page 18 of your report, page 89 of our packet, you make a reference to the fact that the high number of navigation contacts may be indicative of gaps in housing and mental health services available. Many of the people seeking navigational support present with untreated mental health and substance abuse challenges. What do we do about that? And if that's more than
got another hour?
No, we don't. But
so the people that we are seeing in our office, right? The mental health supports that they would probably get come from our community service board, or would come from our community services board. And this is by no means to say they're doing a terrible job. Quite the contrary. I think that they do good work, but I think that they're really struggling to meet the need, right? And I think that's maybe that's probably something more than council can fix. I think that's a statewide issue, right? That's a state problem, a state funding issue, and that would be being able to fund the work of the CSB enough to hire sufficient therapists, paying enough to hire therapists in competition with private clinician fees and that sort of thing. I think being able to make sure there's sufficient case management for individuals through the CSB, because we see a lot of that. People just kind of in need of those services, and they're, as a result, struggling with housing, struggling with whatever it happens to be, employment, all those things, because they can't get those basic services that would enable them to be able to tackle some of those other big problems. And so
I wonder whether you all end up becoming an initial point of contact for people who are in distress, who may not even know what you all could do to help them.
Yes.
But you're an open door.
Yeah, I mean, and to be clear, like, the ordinance doesn't contemplate that. It doesn't say that that's what we should be doing, but it's happened because we're accessible, like you can walk in and there's a human there that's going to answer the door and say, what's going on, right? I think, and people bring people to us, or if we've helped somebody, they tell their friends and they come. So but I think the key here is, why is that happening, right? Why are they coming to our door rather than somebody else's door? And I think that may point to holes in the system of services that are available within our community. And so again, hopefully this year, thanks to Lily's work on the database, we're adding this extra bit of tracking to figure out what is it that we most often see in terms of that navigational piece to say, where's the hole really, and can we back that up with some numbers? Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate all your work.
Thank you all.
It's a heavy lift.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
All right, thank you all so much.
And next on the agenda is the Americans with Disabilities Act. Don't feel like you've got 10 minutes.
I'm going to be really quick. Good evening. I'm Paul Rudisell. I'm the ADA coordinator for the city. As you may know, we recently entered into an agreement with Precision Management in our structure to go over and redo our self-evaluation and transition plan. Charlie's here with us today by Zoom, and he's going to go through the process and explain what's going to happen with the city. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Can you see me and hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. I do have a presentation. I'm not sure how that would be shown. Probably not easy to show it at the same time as you see me.
Yes, you are permitted to screen share on your end.
Got it. Okay. All right, I'll do that then. All right, just give me 1 sec. Okay, can you see that presentation there?
Okay, now we do, yes.
Great. Okay. All right. Scared me for a second there. All right. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate the time. I appreciate the opportunity to work with the city of Charlottesville. We're very excited to get started, and truly we are just getting started. So apologies for some of the lack of detail here, but we've just signed the contract, and we're very excited to dig in and work with Paul and his team to work on this project. So I'll just be doing a quick overview of what a transition plan is, who we are, what a transition plan is, some of the opportunities that you can identify by having an updated transition plan. And please, as with the prior presenters, if you have any questions or thoughts or concerns about anything I say, feel free to interrupt. There. All right, so who we are, Precision Infrastructure Management. Quite simply, this is our business. We do municipal asset management. So we do condition assessments of municipal sidewalks. We also do ADA transition plan development. We've been doing this for many years in various forms for about 15 years. And we're very excited to be working with Charlottesville. So who will be working on this project? You have me, Charlie Zold. I'm one of the managing partners of PIM, as we call it. This is my headshot. That is a few gray hairs and a few children old at this point, so probably should get it updated. Aaron Hester as well will be working on this project, and really the titles are different here, but we're kind of a tag team. The idea being that at all times there's someone available to take calls early in the morning, late at night, weekend. If one of us happens to be out for whatever reason, Aaron can very easily step in and handle anything that needs to be taken care of, and vice versa. So what is an ADA transition plan? As part of Title II of the ADA, which prohibits discrimination against people with disabilities in state and local government, it's a requirement that municipalities with over 50 employees have a transition plan, which simply is saying, look at what you have that is public, look at how it's out of compliance with some of the tenets of the ADA, and develop a game plan to bring it into compliance. Charlottesville has actually done a few of these. So this isn't new to the city of Charlottesville. It's just that part of the requirements is also periodically updating it to make sure that it never gets too stale or too old. The idea of a transition plan is not to become a dusty binder on a shelf. It's supposed to be a living document. And while a transition plan can have a long life, periodically it is smart to sort of start from scratch, look at what was done in the past, and do a whole new self-assessment of both your programs, your services, and also your rights of way. So a couple of requirements within there, public input. So there's a strong public input component to the transition plan, which is exactly what it sounds like, soliciting feedback, explaining what a transition plan is to the residents of Charlottesville, and quite simply asking if they have any issues with accessibility. If someone has an issue with accessing any program or service within Charlottesville, or if they have a area of a sidewalk that they find to be particularly inaccessible, that's something that they can share with us that we will add to the report, and then also prioritize repairs or remediation for those issues at a future time. So public input is one very important component of the transition plan. In addition, an assessment of your public rights of way, facilities, parks, services, and programs for barriers to people with disabilities. So we'll go a little bit deeper into what a barrier is and what it means in future slides, but that's an important component. Remediation and implementation. So once you've identified the barriers, how do you fix the barrier? And also implementation in the sense of making goals and plans for the remediation. Identifying staff responsible. So Paul is already the ADA coordinator, which is a great start. Many municipalities don't have an ADA coordinator. So we're very excited to work with Paul. So working with him to identify any other additional staff that might be responsible for the implementation of recommendations. And then also a review of the grievance procedure, a review of the procedure that Charlottesville already has, just to make sure it's up to date with best practices and identify any ways that we might be able to simplify the process for both the residents and staff of Charlottesville. Any questions before I keep zooming on?
Nope. Thank you.
So just some high-level stuff here. The most recent ADA transition plan was in 2013. It is this time frame is about when it's right to do an update. There's plenty. I was just reviewing the plan before getting onto here, and there's plenty of great stuff in that plan. I can work with Paul to identify goals that were in that plan to see if there's been any progress made. And of course, that's the type of thing that we would highlight in the future transition plan. For the right-of-way, there's about 170 miles. That's not necessarily an exact number. It's pretty difficult to get an exact number, but once we have surveyed everything, we will have a very up-to-date amount of right-of-way in the city, which is a useful number to have for any number of things. And facilities and parks, there's 156 of those, and we'll be doing access audits, self-assessments for each one of those. So what is a self-assessment? On the right-of-way, we're looking, first of all, we're using a PROAG. It's called Public Rights of Way Accessibility Guidelines. These guidelines are still not technically regulations. It's been a long time coming. I was reviewing the 2013 plan, and it referenced them as imminently implemented. They're not quite there yet. They are. It is a good practice to use those guidelines when doing your assessment. For the most part, they are stricter than what is found in the ADA accessibility guidelines. So if you're in compliance with PROAG, you are in compliance with ADAG. And it does seem imminent that they will be implemented at some point in the near future. There's a number of things that make them better than the ADAG guidelines for specifically public rights of way. The ADAG guidelines, not to get too deep in the weeds here, were initially created with facilities really in mind. They weren't necessarily intended to be applied to sidewalks. So what we're looking at, curb ramps, trip hazards, pedestrian signals, inadequate sidewalk width, and a whole number of other things. The pictures here, these are not from Charlottesville. These are from another project that we've been working on, but just as examples. So that first picture on my left of the curb, there is no curb ramp there. So that's one thing we'll be looking for. Areas where there should be a curb ramp, where there is no curb ramp. That's easy enough to identify that. We have a geolocation pin for that. So when the city of Charlottesville is making budgeting decisions, it has an exact count of areas that need to have curb ramps, that don't have curb ramps for remediation. On the right there is a picture of a curb ramp that is not compliant. Curb ramps have been built for decades now. The guidelines have changed dramatically in that time. So what was once compliant might not be compliant anymore, or just as frequently something was built that was not compliant from the moment it was built. So in this situation, this is a curb ramp that just based on the looks of it here, you're missing a detectable warning mat. The slope it looks to be probably too steep. The cross slope, the counter slope of the street also looks a bit steep. A whole host of reasons why this curb ramp here is not compliant with ProAg. So we'll be finding that, and we'll be detailing exactly why it's not compliant, and then working with Paul and other members of the team to come up with a criteria to rank compliant and non-compliance, so that again the city can make very educated decisions about which ramps to spend its budget dollars on. Other things we'll be looking at on your right there, that's a trip hazard sidewalk panel that for one reason or another is no longer flush with the sidewalk panel next to it. This creates a tripping hazard for people who are walking. It creates a barrier for people in a wheelchair. It's a serious people in strollers. I mean, you name it. It's a problem. It causes lawsuits. It causes lack of accessibility. So we identify any lip like that that's over a quarter inch, believe it or not, is out of compliance with ProAg and ADAG. So we'll be looking for all quarter inch and larger hazards of that nature on the right. On the left, there's a walkway there that is less than 4 feet wide. 4 feet wide is the ProAg requirement. So that looks to be about 2 feet, maybe 2.5 feet. So that would be out of compliance. In addition, that fire hydrant right there in the right of way like that, often if you do have a 4 foot sidewalk and that fire hydrant was there, that would also be non-compliant because there's not actually 4 feet of space for a wheelchair or a person to walk past. So we'll be finding all of these, cataloging them all in a geodatabase, and providing them to the city and working with them to develop an implementation plan for how to remediate some of these, which deserve to be remediated earlier, which can be put off into the future. That's sort of the meat and potatoes of the right-of-way section. So I'll keep going ahead unless there's any questions at this point. Facilities and parks. We'll be doing a similar self-assessment for facilities and parks, slightly different things, obviously, that we're looking for. There's 4 priorities and a whole host of other things to be looking for. These pictures here sort of help you understand what it is we're assessing. So the picture on the bottom left there, that's showing, is there an accessible route into a building? So that person in a wheelchair, can that person get from the van that they're exiting all the way into, let's say, City Hall? We're going to be assessing to make sure there's an accessible route. There are regulations for what an accessible route means, and we'll be going over each one of those to make sure that each entranceway into a building is accessible. And then within the building, a similar assessment is done. Can that person get from inside that front door up to the 2nd floor, up to the 3rd floor, to this classroom, to this office? It's a very detailed assessment, and we'll be doing that for each one of the city buildings. Additional things, just again to sort of showcase what it is we're assessing for. We're looking to see if handicapped spaces in parking lots are the correct width, whether the landing zone outside of that space is wide enough for someone in a wheelchair or someone with disabilities. And then all the way on the right there, the width of a corridor is supposed to be a minimum of 36 inches. So things of that nature are what we'll be assessing for. In some other examples, again, just to illustrate the point, bathroom sinks, are they at the right height? Is the plumbing underneath the sink insulated to prevent someone with a wheelchair from burning themselves on the hot water pipe? Are there grab bars near the toilets? Or is there an accessible stall within a bathroom? These types of things writ large over the entire network, parks, pools, there are special regulations and guidelines for each one of those, and we'll be looking into all City of Charlottesville facilities and parks to determine their compliance. I'll keep going here. Programs and services. So Dr. Janet Burke will be working with us on this. Dr. Burke is an ADA coordinator. She has extensive experience when it comes to assessing programs and services for municipalities. She was actually the ADA coordinator for Colorado Springs for a good bit of time. She's a nationally known expert on these particular items, and she will be looking at the non-physical items that we're assessing. So programs and services, ensuring that any program or service, any department has a plan to either ensure that what's being provided is accessible, or has a plan to make it accessible if there is a grievance or if there is a special accommodation requested. So Dr. Burke will be working on that. She will also be doing a review of the city website. So implementation. This data is extremely interesting and useful, of course, just in its own right. Figuring out what's accessible, what's not accessible is an important goal on its face. In addition, though, it's an opportunity to support other initiatives in the city of Charlottesville. So one of the things that we pride ourselves here at PIM, Precision Infrastructure Management, is using this data to create really good asset management plans for our customers. So we have this incredible wealth of data about what's there, what barriers are on the sidewalk, and we will first work with the team to develop sort of a timeline. You know, when you want things to be remediated, what the budgeting would allow for, and then also to focus on initiatives such as the Green Initiative. So one of the things we like to focus on is alternative maintenance activities. So if you have a sidewalk issue, you don't necessarily need to jackhammer out the concrete and pour new concrete. That's a very wasteful process. The concrete cannot always be recycled. Even if it can be recycled, you're still hauling it out to the dump and then pouring new concrete, which is a significant carbon emitter. So we have alternative maintenance activities that use less concrete that we would suggest. Other items, you can use polyjacking or mudjacking to improve or remediate certain issues. So using our background in the remediation side of asset management, we develop tailored plans that should help save Charlottesville both budgetary dollars and also carbon emissions. Engagement, just to briefly go into this, very important component of what we're doing. Starting with fact-finding and situational awareness. This is the stage that we're in right now, just understanding what the lay of the land is. I'll be working with Paul to get a list of people to speak with, boards to meet with. A few of the people who spoke already today, I think would be very interesting to speak with about what they're doing when it comes to accessibility. Two, starting to have meetings, both large format meetings where people can sort of come as a larger group, but also as importantly, small format meetings. One of the things we really work on is ensuring that we have a diverse group of people who are giving their public input. If you just do the classic methods where you sort of just broadcast out and wait for people to respond back, you often get a one-sided view of what's going on. So we take active steps to make sure we're getting a diverse group of people who are responding to our questions. And then taking that feedback and incorporating it into the data that we're finding. So we find it to be a very powerful tool. You take public feedback, you add incredibly high quality, detailed data, and you can create a very strong asset management plan, ADA transition plan with that information. So additional items beyond the transition plan. Using that data, looking at it from a risk-based approach. With all that data, you can figure out what your highest risk areas are, or your highest areas with the most barriers. So you can prioritize those areas over other areas that maybe don't need the funding. And then very importantly, equitable implementation. One thing we've done with other customers is we look at census data, and if there are any equity groups that have been historically disadvantaged or underinvested in, you can use that to change exactly how dollars are allocated from a location, or we use FIP zones, which are census zones, from a census zone range. Just to put a visual to that, work orders often in the past, work orders come in. It's from the public is telling you what the issues are. Again, this is often gives you sort of a skewed view of what's really happening out there on the sidewalks or out there in your facilities. And we move that to a more proactive approach where we're looking at it from a risk-based plan, an equity-based lens, and then we weight that equity lens further with city input to give you a really tailored, really powerful asset management plan that will reduce your barriers, increase your accessibility for residents of Charlottesville. just some visuals based on what I'm talking about here. How we'll present the data. So, looking at this here, you can see deficiencies per mile by FIP zone. So this is for a project we did for the city of Durham in North Carolina. And you can see that 301 here in the upper left, that FIP zone has the largest number of deficiencies per mile. So you can very quickly look at a graph like this and understand which areas need your investment fastest. A little bit more on the alternative maintenance activities that we'll be focusing on. Precision concrete cutting, it's a way to remove those trip hazards in an environmentally friendly, financially friendly, and time advantageous way. Ponding mitigation, so often at the bottom of a curb ramp you end up with water ponding. You can use ponding mitigation technology to reduce those ponds so that what was once a blocked area becomes accessible again. So these are all the types of things that we'll bring to a report so that Charlottesville can move quickly, increase accessibility for the residents. From a scheduling perspective, field collection on the right-of-way will be starting sort of in beta phase, we'll say, this week. We will have two surveyors on the ground starting, we'll have one starting tomorrow, Tuesday, and then we'll have another joining him on Wednesday. I have good news. One of them's from Durham, so he's probably going to spend a lot of money, according to the earlier data. And he will be staying in a hotel, so double whammy there. But yeah, this week we're going to start. Really, it's more of a training week. We have a list of exactly what we're collecting. So we're going to collect it. We're going to make sure that the data is flowing the way we want it to flow. We're going to speak with Paul and his team to make sure that the data looks the way he wants it to look, and it's being collected in a way that's organized in a way that works for him and his team. So we want to get that going ASAP because the goal, as you'll see at the end, is to get this done by the end of this year. And that is a heavy lift. It absolutely can be done, but if it's going to be done on time, we need to get the field collection started and finished as quickly as possible because the report generating component often takes a lot longer than expected. I'm sure everyone here has experienced this. Drafts going back and forth don't always move at the fastest speed. So we want to get that process ongoing ASAP. And to do that, we need to get boots on the ground collecting information as quickly as possible, which is why we're getting field collection done, or why we're starting field collection this week and not waiting for some of the other items to get rolling. Speaking of those other items, public outreach, we'll start that in July. And while most of that activity will be done in the first few months, really the plan will be to have it ongoing until the end of the project. And once we have good processes in place, really it can continue on until whenever. It will become baked into the ADA transition plan, into the grievance procedure to make sure that people always can let their voices be heard when it comes to accessibility. So field collection on the right-of-way starting this week. We will do facilities and parks after the right-of-way is finished. And then the program services and website with Dr. Burke, that will be ongoing. We'll probably get that started. I think July is probably a good estimate for when we'll start that process as well. And as part of that process, there will be some requirements from city staff for brief interviews with Dr. Burke, just to learn more about how their departments work, what their best practices are. It's not at all intended to be a gotcha of any kind. The goal is to just find areas that find out what the default is right now and any suggestions for improvement. So that'll start in July, and then as mentioned earlier, the report, we hope to deliver it before the end of this year. And that's everything. So any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Just one question. I know we're very over time, but you referenced at the very beginning, a consultant report that sits on a shelf, not much changes. I know the city's never done that, and we would never contemplate doing that in the future. But what would it actually? What does it actually take for these ADA improvements to get built out? Is it a problem of project manager capacity, investment in departments in terms of systems to track and manage projects, money that city council has allocated for actual infrastructure? What do we need to do to see that this actually results in changes people deserve?
Great question. I would say you have the most important component already, which is you have Paul. So Paul, not to put pressure on you, but the fact that you have Paul, who's already in his position, engaged, excited about this process. I know that he's been the champion for getting this report done. That's step one. As part of the deliverables, when we bid on this project, it was coming up with a plan to do exactly what you're talking about. So we have built out a project management plan and tool to have semi-regular check-ins for, I think it's built out for 5 years right now, sort of, goals, objectives, and then results to help keep everybody accountable and on task when it comes to reducing these barriers. But you did hit on the most important one, which is budget and funding. If you can be as on task as possible, but unless you have the dedicated funding to reduce some of the barriers, you're not going to make much headway. So while there are some things that won't require a ton of investment, on the programs and services side, there might be some small suggestions about language or things to provide, if necessary, that can be done quite easily. There's no way to affordably add a curb ramp. A curb ramp has a fixed cost, and it will always have a fixed cost. So budget's an important one, and that is, again, why we focus so heavily on those alternative maintenance activities, because we do want to make sure that you're using the best possible method to remove the most possible barriers as quickly as possible.
In response to the councilman's question, our ADA coordinator has been given the directive to create a culture of compliance with respect to ADA. That is our commitment. This transition plan will help us along the way to get there. Now, when we get the transition plan, it's going to have a lot of recommendations that will have dollar tags attached to them. We have to see where it fits in the CIP plan, but it's got to be scheduled. And this gives us a clear guideline on how we can move consistently to get this done, and that's our commitment.
Questions, anybody else?
Thank you.
Thank you. We look forward to the work.
Thank you. Very excited to get started. Appreciate your time.
Okay, so that wraps up our 4 p.m. agenda. We're due to come back at 6:30. Do we have a motion to go into closed session again?
I do. I've got one here.
Okay.
Pursuant to Section 2.2-3712 of the Virginia Code, I hereby move that City Council close this open meeting and convene in a closed session as authorized by Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A1 for 1, discussion and consideration of candidates to be interviewed for upcoming vacancies on the Planning Commission, and 2, discussion and consideration of candidates to be interviewed for upcoming vacancies on the Charlottesville Redevelopment and Housing Authority.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. Council will now be in closed session. We will return at 6:30 p.m. For those joining by Zoom, there is a separate link, a different link for the 6:30 meeting. See you all in a little bit.